Echo on my command. Hey, y'all. Welcome to this exciting episode of Black Beat Podcast, where we try to bring information to the black community unadulterated, clear, and direct. Hey, y'all. Listen here. Today, I got an exciting, as you know, one of my partners, they come to the house every once in a while, but today I got Nate McCoy from NAMC here today with me, and I'm going to tell you, every time I have my brother on the show, man, he's always packing a punch with a bunch of information for y'all. So today we're going to talk about some things, and that we're going to talk about today about the state of black business in Oregon. There's so much going on in Oregon, and sometimes it appears that Oregon is dark, but that only depends on where you at, right? Because Eastern Oregon looks pretty good compared to downtown Portland. But hey, look, we got some things going on. And one of the things that, Nate, I want to talk to you today, but by the way, Nate, welcome to the show today.
Thank you.
And I got my co-host with me, Fawn Aberson, also, bringing that action-packed information, constantly keeping us on our toes about things that are going on. But today we want to talk about one or two things that I think that are affecting our listening base. And we're going to talk about this disparity study, Nate, that just came out, the state of black business, or just the state of black Oregon around these issues around contracting and around being able to have access to some of the dollars that are flowing in that are federal level dollars and things like that. So, hey, Nate, you want to speak a little bit about this here state of black Oregon thing? Because I remember the last time I looked at it is that black folks on that disparity study is still in despair.
Man. And that tends to still be the case, Mr. Washington.
Well, tell me about it.
Well, first and foremost, happy to be here with you today.
Appreciate you, Nate.
Representing the Oregon chapter of the National Association of Minority Contractors, which really represents more than just construction. We also represent design and professional services, helping businesses of color thrive. Not just busting through the door, but busting through the door and getting some economics. So what we center in today on this show with you is talking about something not new to black people, which is disparity studies.
Some more study on disparity. Now, but we be experiencing disparity, don't we?
Pretty much our whole life.
Despair. The Lord may help us now.
And these are terms I think are used to keep us in desperate times.
Yeah, man.
And what I think is starting to bubble up, and this ain't just synonymous to this disparity study, but the old saying of a rising tide lifts all boats.
The
that's
one
the mission,
thing, right?
That's the mission. And the one thing I can say is that the rising tide is definitely happening in Oregon with all the stimulus dollars you just ran off from federal, local, state. The problem is all these boats aren't rising together.
Yeah.
And so as you just discussed about the disparity study, just real quick, 2020 census says that we got 4.2 million people in the state of Oregon. 75% of them white, 14% of them Hispanic, almost 5% of them Asian Pacific Islander, 2% black, and I would almost put a caveat at almost 2% being incarcerated along with that 2% that isn't.
Right, that isn't. So we look at more like 3.6.
So yes, 3.6, 4% for the state, and then 1.5% for natives. Now, when we look at the state combined spend yearly, we see that they spend about $3.2 billion. And that's across, that's a big lick across all industries, not just the construction industry. And what we dove deeper down to find, because you got to chase the money on these kind of things, is that of the system of all white folks, women or men, they make up 96% of the spend.
Wow.
And all the ethnic groups, women of color, men of color, every ethnic group you can imagine is only getting about 4% of the whole state spend. And I just ran off the population census.
And I think some of the numbers look like 89% is white males.
Yep.
Man, but I thought that was what the overall agenda of the state was, is to somehow or another get some equity down the line.
And see, and that's the precipice we're at, is that we talk a lot in a so-called progressive state in Oregon with so-called leaders that want to lead all of us. But what we keep finding is because we lack representation at these legislative levels and at these politician levels, that we have a lot of people who speak for us on what we want and need versus us speaking for what we want and need. And so we've got to change that. And I think we're just at a point in time to where in the black community, and we talk about this all the time, John, we got to be more united. because a lot of these other ethnic groups, they got their plans together, and we don't. And so until we can get that solved and figured out, we're going to continue to be in these disparity studies looking desperate.
Tired of high gas prices? Save money on your transportation costs with TriMet's reduced fare transit card. If you meet income requirements, you can get your first month free while you enjoy unlimited rides on buses and trains anywhere TriMet goes. That's 1 month free, a $28 value when you sign up today for TriMet's reduced fare card. We'll help you travel smarter and make your money go further no matter what the price is at the pump. Visit TriMet.org/save to learn more and apply today. That's TriMet.org/save. TriMet. How life moves.
Let me ask you guys something. So, John, thanks for introducing me. So, I am the
this
managing.
This is Fawn Aberson, y'all.
Oh, you already said that, yeah.
Well, I need to say it again.
And where are you from? Again. You're not from the South, y'all. I'm the only one from the Midwest.
I'm from Georgia.
Okay, so I'm the only one.
My family's from Louisiana.
Okay.
My grandma raised me.
What's your problem? Talk about you from. Yeah, you're
definitely from Jersey.
Yeah, well, that's like by way of.
We know what you say over there. You say it a lot in the office.
Hoorah, hoorah.
I'm not going to repeat it. So, okay, the disparity study, right? $3.2 billion. That was over 4 years, though, right? That study. It was from 2017 to 2021.
Correct.
Right? And in that study, they had $3.2 billion to give as 1,068 executive agencies, and that wasn't even all the agencies, right? Yep. That was just a percentage.
Yep.
Right? And these people can do all kinds of contracting and procurement, and they just don't.
Yep.
Right? So part of the problem is they just don't. Another part of the problem is when they do, the workforce isn't there, yep. Right? Especially the Black entrepreneurship core workforce isn't there. That's a big part of the problem, too, is It doesn't exist, right? And there could be contracts and stuff given out, but we have to do, the first development is like get more people into business, right? And second, God, it was right before I said y'all, it kind of escaped me, but I wanted to point out that you just had a mayoral debate and you talked about leadership. So what is the deal with leadership in the state, in the county, in the city? That doesn't seem to, it was like one thing when the George Floyd thing happened, right? Then everybody was pro-black, and that was short-lived, right? And it was like, okay, we gave you a year's worth of extra consideration. Now it's back to normal. What do you guys feel about that? And why do you think the leadership just isn't prioritizing black issues? Because they're just not.
Well, I got a sense of why they're not prioritizing. I think, to me, I think it's more on the national trend. And right after they went after Roe v. Wade and a lot of the affirmative action basic things, and then they went after the whole abortion reality, these things that are going. I think it's the country's agenda. I think that it's more of a national trend that we're starting to see, and we're being affected by it. I think adversely. But to a greater or lesser degree, I think Oregon, to some degree, is still trying to uphold some of these policies and standards on the issue around equity and diversity. But at the same time, I do believe, at least for the black community, this whole idea around equity and diversity is the problem. But I'm going to leave it there. I mean, because I can unpack that a little bit more, but to a greater degree, because right now, and it used to be when diversity came down for us, I remember clearly when it came, right? I remember that white organizations and a whole lot of the LGBTQ and handicaps and a lot of these other organizations came to those ones of us that were dealing with some of the civil rights issues at that time, and they said to us, hey, look, why don't you guys allow some of these other things on this platform with you guys, and it would probably advance your platform. Well, 25 years came later, and the platform did advance. Fortunately for all those who were added to it, they all seem to have their signature conversations today. They're all doing well. The LGBTQ community is standing on its own. Women issues are standing on its own. All these types of handicap issues standing on its own. But to me, after looking at the 25 years of time, the only people who didn't launch or didn't elevate for some odd reason was the very people that the platform was designed for. And it's so amazing to me after all these many years, and we're looking at this whole equity thing. And to me, looking at this equity thing, not resolving the civil right issue at that time, and now we're looking at this equity issue, to me is what the watering down reality was all about. The intention was to somehow or another try to address or head off the potential train wreck around this whole issue of reparations. Okay, and so I still think that those things are in the book, but for me to be in a room right now talking about everybody's issues was part of the plan, because it sort of diluted the black agenda and the black issue to a greater degree. And that's just my take on it, because I've had a front row seat looking at it. I'm not saying that equity and diversity is a bad thing for probably for a different situation if we all came into that situation from the same standpoint of view. But we didn't. We arrived there with Plymouth Rock on us instead of us being on Plymouth Rock. And because the numbers don't look no different than they did 25, 30 years ago. You know, man, ain't nothing really changed. And this is what really is a concern to me. But I don't understand why we're not able to navigate the complexities, because the study clearly outlines who is deficient, right? Clearly outlines the fact that the African-American male in the state of Oregon is deficient in any opportunities, upward mobilities, that these opportunities can present themselves for us. So I'm looking at this situation, I'm going, well, damn, that number, I seen that number 25 years ago, 1%. Well, 1%. And then we talk about this incarceration piece. It used to be, when we did the state of black Oregon, the state of black nation, the United States, is that we looked at that aspect of the disparity also. And still this day, under Measure 11 and all those types of things, we incarcerated pretty close to almost 30% of the demographic. Okay?
So John, so Nate, under his organization, NAMC, they just held a mayoral debate, right? So they had 3 mayor candidates that were there: Keith Wilson, Carmen Rubio, Commissioner Rubio, and Commissioner Mapps. Yep. And anyway, a number of questions were asked. And so we know the disparity and the deficiency, but are you feeling like any, Nate, you're in the mix, right? Sometimes you're talking with the governor's office and stuff, and John, same here, we're talking to a lot of leaders. Are you hearing any strategy that prioritizes business investment? As we pointed out, there was, Commissioner Gonzalez tweeted a few months ago that over the course, since 2015, $1.7 billion was spent on the homelessness crisis. And that was just city funds, right? And city gives their funds to Multnomah County. So that wasn't state funds, that wasn't county funds, that wasn't any other funds. That was just city funds, right? And now we just learned that in the budget, $650 million is from the county is going to be dedicated to housing and homeless services. And, you guys are both proponents of workforce. You're both proponents of the economy. We're seeing a lot of economic flight out of the city of Portland. Some suburbs are doing really good. But what do you think it is about our leadership that doesn't seem to see the economics of small businesses and workforce as a state of emergency?
Go ahead, Nick.
Yeah, I was going to say that's a great question, and I'll at least frame it in what I call kind of the trifecta of problems that I think no one leader can actually accomplish alone. So I think it's a leader who can galvanize around other leaders to really accomplish many of these things we're talking about. But 3 things that I think you cannot pass to even generate a robust workforce, nor even a business, entrepreneur, mature business, is that we have the hugest deficit in school education of our kids. They are 2 or 3 grades behind the national average. Some of the southern states that are literally striping away African American history are surpassing even Oregon on school education. So I think about the next generation of workforce, regardless of whatever industry they're in, they're not even well equipped at the age of middle school. So we're talking about 7 to 12-year-olds, not even at the national average where they should be just education alone. Then you add on housing, you add on issues of houselessness, Literally in Beaverton, they have the hugest minority population of houseless kids in school. And then the third being small businesses, which we're talking about today. And when we literally approach small businesses and we see these desperate numbers around how much contracts and revenue they generate, we have a huge problem. And the issue, and we raised it at the mayoral debate, was that the resources available to help support wraparound technical assistance for these firms as they come in online as new businesses, as they're looking to grow and expand and become more mature. You can go to every agency in the whole state of Oregon and combine all their dollars, and it wouldn't even support the business needs that we have today. So when we really talk about passing bonds or, putting real dollars on the streets to really help these businesses stand up, we ain't even close to the needs that we have. And I'm talking about 100 million in needs, and most of these support programs are at minimum no more than $1 million.
Yeah,
so
and it's
hard to
interesting
address.
you toted that number of 100 million because this grant that Prosper and then put down with Reimagine, for example, right, which was $5 million, right? But the realization was that they had over 100 million in an ask, which tells us that there's a real active reality that's going on. There's a crisis going on. We've been touting this whole issue around crisis in small business for the last 3 years now. Okay, we've seen it coming, and the question still remains of these dollars and why they're being allotted. Man, it took me a little while to get past the victim stage of being in business. They're doing something to us, and start taking some responsibility for my destiny, right? But I think the thing that really struck me a little bit more about the city and the things it did is that we're constantly looking at these systems that continue to make people dependent upon these systems and constructs, right?
Yes.
We don't allow for the American dream to actually take hold. But in the last couple of years, I'm starting to question, Nate, rather not if the American dream is really still the American dream. The state says that it's 86% of the dollars that come into its systems are supported by small businesses, right? 86%.
Yep.
And that's a big number, but yet the realization of it is that how do we get to share in the American dream in a way that is supportive of us getting home ownership and develop? And for me, I think some of the national voice, and sometimes you got to be careful about how you slate these kinds of conversations, right? But we all can see the fact that these Republican agendas or these agendas that are political agendas, we're in the middle of those footballs. And I always believe this, is that from the Floyd issues to the knee on the necks and all of that stuff, these accountability realities, when we hit the demographic that is sort of in control of some of these directions that we wind up finding ourselves in, there's always seems to be a retaliation somehow. Yeah. And how are we affected in this kind of way? And to me, that retaliation always appears to be some kind of oppressive or suppressive reality that somehow or another alters our growth or alters our ability to achieve this American dream that's been put in front of us. And I don't like being so esoteric about that, man, but it's kind of hard to talk about these things when you know this bigger picture exists out there, right? Because it's blatant, it's everywhere. You can see it on the news or whatever. But the question for us in this state is, how do we overcome some of these barriers that we have for growth in small business, and what are some of the initiatives that we need to begin to neither initiate, investigate, support? How do we approach this thing to be able to get some growth within the sector in which we're trying to talk about? So I'm a little bit
well, what I heard Nate say, education, and then he said what else did you say? Housing, right? And then you said small business economic. But Nate, so I know Portland Public Schools is talking about $30 million cut, and then next year $70 million cut. They're talking about closing schools. Of course, who's here in Portland investing anymore these days? We've got homeowners. We've got mostly minority
business owners.
Prosper Portland presented before the city council a couple of weeks ago, state of small business, right? 94% of the businesses in Multnomah County are small businesses. 94%. 6%
about small
are
business
large.
state.
Yeah.
Our large businesses are leaving. They're divesting in our communities, right? They're not getting support. We know that small businesses sort of live on the ecoculture of large businesses, right? Because they drive foot traffic, and then, of course, small businesses pick up some of the residuals of that traffic, but they also get contracts with large companies, right?
Yeah.
When large companies are investing into the community, a lot of times small businesses are benefiting as a result of that investment. But again, I want to ask you guys, really, I need your answers to these questions. And this question is, tell me first, who on the state level, county level, city level, do you feel is like hearing, oh yeah, small businesses need, the agencies, whatever, they need a strategic plan? Because as John said, $105 million in asks, 287 applications for the Reimagine Fund, and that was just to prioritize Black and BIPOC communities. And each one of those applications had to say how they were going to grow jobs and grow revenue, right? Mm-hmm. And in my opinion, when you're talking about $650 million in housing, continue since 2015, $1.7 billion, right? And now $650 million dollars this year. There was $56 million in ask in the Equity Fund from Business Oregon, right? That's $175 million. It's like, that seems like we always have that kind of money. Why wouldn't they pour it into business? Why wouldn't they pour it into people who are hiring jobs, paying taxes? All of those people have families. You take those applications time, 5 to 7 to 10 on their staff and in their families. Now you're impacting real numbers, same numbers of homeless people out there. Again, how come it can't be seen as a priority?
I find it's a dependency model, and I think the things that we're investing in, because regardless of how I may see it, but what I see today is simply when you got so much money going into fentanyl, I've never seen, and I've been in the treatment business for over 25, 30 years. Yep. I've never seen, there was a time when there wasn't that much money went into the gang intervention situation, and they say over 700 people in the last couple of years died of fentanyl overdose, and the majority of them was white males in the state of Oregon, right? But I remember a time when the gang violence in the state of Oregon, where we had over 280 murders, right? Mm-hmm. And that's when the House of Emotion and all them people came out, and some money was being pumped into that. But even then, the amount of money that was pumped into those deaths was not the amount of money that's being pumped into the fentanyl and the housing crisis reality that's going on here. What's the difference? Well, for me, in a bigger way, unless the fact of the matter is that there's more white people involved in these situations right now, that the demographic is showing clearly that it's about white America, right? You don't hear about Black America and the fentanyl poisoning. You don't hear about too much blacks in the homeless reality. I think that where we have arrived to is still the question that you're raising right now, and is why can't we support the American dream in the demographics that are having difficulty being able to have access to it, okay? Why can't we come together to support the demographic do that? To me, it's the oxymoron in the room because of the fact that it's breaking away from that dependency model when we begin to do that. To me, I believe white America is always looking for a way to help somebody, but it needs to stay in that position of helping, not so much in allowing the demographic to become. And that's just me. After being around long enough, looking at all this phenomenon, because it doesn't appear to me a difficult solution
John,
to be solved.
Why aren't, and Nate, could you answer this too? Why do you think the leadership in this state is not prioritizing this? Can you speak to that specifically, Nate?
Let me just give you one highlight, because we wanted to talk about current initiatives that I would say didn't start right now, but started a couple months ago. We came together as NAMC and the Black Business Association of Oregon to propose a bill, House Bill 4101, which had a lot of fruit on it, which would have allowed on the Secretary of State filing document for every business in the state of Oregon that either has to renew every year or start a new business and pay that fee that everybody pays to have a business in Oregon, a checkbox at the bottom that would allow you to attest your ethnicity, your gender, and your veteran status. And people ask me, well, why is that important and what does that mean and what would that do to really help support unifying small businesses? Well, if you go to the state approved, the state funded COVID directory, which every small business that's looking at public projects needs to be a part of, gives you the label of a minority business enterprise, woman business enterprise, veteran business, or emerging small business. And what that allows you is to have a little bit more access, not a guarantee, but some access into state agency projects like we just ran off numbers on. The problem with that system is it's a small office that represents the whole state that was only built for people of color to be able to get state level contracts, and everybody in the whole state is now borrowing from that program. What that means is you get a lot of fraud in the system of companies that should not probably be certified to get additional support, technical assistance, project opportunities. And the limited disparity study showed that they were only able to find 63 companies. Now, if we really found more companies, I think the disparity would be even worse, because there's more companies that would be available than what they counted for in a limited sample pool, like you said. So what we wanted to really propose in front of the economic
In this House Bill 4101?
Yes, in front of the economic committee on the state's resources and where they deploy them, also working with COVID. They thought this was a good idea because it allows them, for those groups like us and y'all who help people get COVID certified, who help them find work, we would then be able to create a whole list of everybody who's a small business in our whole state. And then we would actually know where to find them if they in Bend, Oregon, if they in Medford, if they in Portland. But there is no robust list that we can find today that would allow that to, basically be created, to be managed, and, really followed up on. We've already had a whole bunch of NAMC members come on who had never heard of a NAMC and had never heard of COVID in this recent year. So when we went and proposed it, it flew through.
Right.
That was your.
Let me ask this question, Nate. Now, when we look at the disparity study, right? I mean, let's really look at the disparity.
Well,
now,
wait. So that bill never got passed, or
never got passed,
Okay.
but we plan on re-proposing it next year, and that's why I wanted to mention it.
Okay.
Okay, so we're talking about $2.85 billion in funds that we're talking about on this disparity study, right? Does the white male who reflects the majority of the recipient of the funding, right, the 89.1%, do they also have to do COVID certification?
No, they don't. They actually are not allowed to be in the COVID system.
So, okay, so then let's break down the 10.9% of the demographic
Talking
of
about
the
them
little
scraps,
the
them little
that
scraps
they talk
left?
about. Because what I'm seeing here is on that, out of that 10.9%,
Come on.
0.1% was black, right? 1% was Asian and Pacific Islands, 1.3% was Native American, and 2% was Hispanic, right? Now, just listen to those numbers. It doesn't require a rocket scientist to recognize that there's a problem. Something is broken.
Yep.
Right? So, but the realization of COVID certification was to assert some growth in this category, right?
Yes.
So here we are, COVID certified. We're certified. But yet, why is it so difficult to see the numbers and say, hey, listen, the lesser amongst us are not receiving what we intended this for. So obviously, who's ever in insulating these situations are
for
also
sure,
protecting
because
them.
the study initiated under Governor Kate Brown and through the Department of Administrative Studies, right? But then the outcomes came when Governor Tina Kotek
Took it.
was the governor, and that was in November. So I'm going to ask you guys, as community-based organization, as leaders, why do you think Governor Tina Kotek has not seen this study and signaled signals this as a state of emergency. Can you answer that?
Well, let me just tell you real quick, because I was probably one of the first folks like y'all to get into the headlines. Got right into the headlines right after this report came out in November, and had a meeting with Governor Tina Kotek in December to make sure that her and her team that were very new recognize that all of us in the community supporting businesses did not see this as acceptable, did not think that this was anything new, and she affirmed all of those things and asked me, quite frankly, what do you think the solution is? And I said we have to overhaul all procurements in the state of Oregon. They have to move to things like ODOT's doing with CMGCs, where you're not only looking at low bid. If you're a small business and you're trying to compete for a low bid project and you have no money, how are you ever going to win? So we're seeing a lot of fruit when we can use other alternative procurements, because many of these procurements were not set up for black and brown people. They were set up for our white community. And we got to own that, and we got to be truthful about it. And what we really need to do, that these disparity studies give you the opportunity to, is create capacity building programs that direct work directly to these small businesses of color. And if it was me, a kingmaker for a day, I would make it all race conscious, because they use a lot of these aspirational goals back to the diversity programs.
And that
they
was
always
what
lead
that's all
to
been
this.
designed for,
Of course.
It's just to have the conversation in the room, but the conversation, when we look at the demographic numbers, obviously the conversation and its delusion or its diluting is continuously reinforcing what we're seeing on this piece of paper.
So, John, why do you think Governor Tina Kotek hasn't declared it a state of emergency around this?
Because I believe Tina Kotek recognizes the fact that white America is under attack by fentanyl and houselessness and homelessness. But we can dissect that reality. There's a pathology that is associated with how we arrived here. And to the homeless issue, there has been homeless people in the state of Oregon for a long time. But when we had Occupy and all these other people that came in that was transient, that's still here doing these things, living out on the streets, all that, it proliferated the numbers. The fentanyl crisis is another one. It's a direct result of not having the construct and the systems in place to deal with treatments, and because that all system got dismantled when under Margaret Carter, when she had the helm of mental health.
Okay, so why can't the two live together? Why can't social services and capitalism live together?
I don't think that there's a problem with them both living together.
Are they living together right now?
No, they're not. I think that because we tend to jump from one, over the last 5 years, we've been jumping from one crisis to another. Okay, so we're crisis driven. It doesn't look like the construct is looking at the idea of solutions. It's just looking at addressing crisis. And we're throwing a lot of resources at just addressing crisis.
And I agree with what John's saying. I would say, and simply put, that the only answer to social justice is economic justice. And you can look at that anywhere. And who better than people who come from the same lived experience to help the people that come from that same experience? And we have companies at NAMC that have grown to the size of 100 million plus who do a lot of that own philanthropic work themselves. Oh yeah, you know a couple of them. Y'all in good company with them, so you know who I'm talking about. I don't need to name names because they don't want that.
But, I remember I was down there.
And let me give you one other potential a couple of potential opportunities that are based off of the governor's kind of list of priorities. So y'all mentioned housing. She's about to spend a ton of money on affordable housing. What if that housing could be workforce housing? Workforce housing, which she's already kind of started talking about, but I've been talking about for 10 years. Our state does not have the high incomes for us to even support people transitioning out of affordable housing into real home ownership. You can't even be black and live in Portland any longer, even at a 1,500 square unit house. These are now $600,000 plus in anywhere in what used to be the Northeast Portland for black community. So if that's the case, we have to build affordable housing that allows people to transition quicker into home ownership, and I think we have to concentrate that around other key projects happening.
Right.
Y'all heard about Intel expanding out there in Hillsborough. They're about to spend $36 billion. Federal government gave them $8 billion. They came up with their own $28 billion.
And there's microchip or something here, right?
And
here
microchip in Gresham. In Gresham.
Oh, it's in Gresham?
Yep,
I thought it was in Portland.
Well, no, but
Okay.
I mean, that's an opportunity too. Most of the people have moved out to Gresham that are black and brown that can't afford to live in Portland. So there's the opportunity in Gresham too. And then you also talk about the IBR Bridge.
Yeah,
which is a
Interstate
bridge over to
Renewal
Washington,
Project.
but a whole lot of economic opportunities there for people who still live in Northeast Portland or who might want to come back to Northeast Portland because of workforce housing and a job.
Okay, so let me ask this last question, and then we got to wrap it up, right? So when I hear overhaul procurement systems, when I hear take a look at this, when I hear study, when I hear we need to look deeper, what I hear is more jobs for white male-owned firms, right? Engineering firms, data collection firms. There's not those firms here, right? I'm watching certain processes happen right now where a lot of money is being poured into a system, looking at it, but none of that money is going to black firms, or very little of that money is going to black firms. So we spend the bulk of the examination process funding non-black owned firms, and then when it comes time to implementation, then there's a little bit.
Yeah, no, fine. You're bringing up a key aspect of what will help us, and I think about, and this is a great organization, but they're the only shining example I think a lot of our private sector, public sector, and legislators look to, and Eco Northwest, who does a lot of economist work here in the state of Oregon, and they do it very well. But I'm ready for us to get a black economist that can really tell us what this picture looks like, maybe even help us, create a path out of it that shows that desperate impact shrinking. The only measure I can come up with is construction is the highest grossing on the GDP right now. And that means that people with backgrounds can get a job making over $40 an hour right now. Same thing with CDL drivers. Like, all these things are on high demand, but we have so many limited resources to share this to the world in Oregon, to the big population that we have. And I think we got to get very creative on how we market some of these things so that we don't get missed with almost $45 billion coming in the next 5 to 10 years.
I listened to what Nate said earlier about education.
Yep.
Right? And when I think about the phenomenon or the construct, for example, that we're facing, and that the problems that we're facing within these structures, I think about when we looked at the history of computers and technology and all that, and how it came on, and we all recognized that who got wealthy off of that was the 35-year-old white male who initiated these things. And a lot of the technologies in which we experienced is very similar structurally in America. Those people who have resources to be able to initiate the next cutting-edge reality, right? But there's an irony in all this, is that how do you talk about equity when you don't arrive at the table with everybody being equal, right? Number one. And number two is, how do we get a construct or a system in place that addresses the disparities when there is no equality?
Policy gatekeepers, right?
Well,
There's, as Nate alluded, the policy, when you try to move that policy, the gatekeeping is alive and well.
You can't start a race, right? You get a race, you put everybody on the starting line, and you go, okay, black people, step back 10 miles.
Yeah,
and then you
10
shoot
miles
the gun,
for real.
right? And then everybody takes off. And they take off running. And then all of a sudden you get an intersection where you say, okay, we got to make some adjustments here. We got to change sneakers. And we want to know if everybody is comfortable and everybody's winning this race, and we're going to all arrive at the place equally at the same time. When in fact, we didn't start off at the same place at the same time. So how does any of these constructs arrive at equity?
Okay, so this is Black Beat Podcast.
Gotcha.
This has to continue for another time.
Well, hey, look, but I'm here to tell you that it's just ironic that we keep talking about these types of things when, in fact, we have not started out. We cannot arrive at an outcome that the equation won't allow us to arrive at. Okay?
So it sounds like maybe, there's some opportunity for organizations to be working with NAMC. Sounds like House Bill 4101 has to be repackaged and probably put some more stuff in there, Nate, because we love
and
our construction companies, but we love all of our companies, right?
Yep.
So there's
Fawn,
the opportunity.
And Fawn, I would tell you the missed opportunity when we went down to Salem.
Yeah.
We didn't have our coalition together like we
Gotcha.
should have
Yeah.
had. So,
And that's the
that's
next
the lesson
step, right?
learned for the next time.
Sure.
We should have
Yeah.
been packing the room
Right.
and
Yeah.
making sure we were heard
Right.
and that they would be voting on this stuff.
Yeah.
And we will learn and we will get better for next year.
Okay. Wow.
Yeah. Well,
Stay
hey,
tuned.
y'all, we do appreciate y'all letting us have this conversation with you. You know, and to me, it's a lot more complex than we think it is, but it's really not. And I think that's why I'm not going to mention his name. He's getting traction in the politics because he's been able to find this little pocket of people who are experiencing the same conversations we're having, that know a little bit about rather not if this disparity study, if it's clear about who is supposed to be addressed in the disparity study, well, I see where there's a fence to be blocked, you know. So anyway, I do appreciate you letting us talk here on your show today, and thank you.
Whose show? My show?
It's your show.
No, I was the moderator. All right.
Anyway, y'all, we appreciate it, man. Welcome.
Thank
to
you,
this
John
exciting
and
episode of Black
Fawn.
Bee. Hey, man, we appreciate you coming out here, Nate. Yeah.
Absolutely. Anytime.
Yes, sir. Yeah, man. So I spoke.